To today's webinar. We will be starting with this TechCast in just a moment. As soon as we let a few people flood in here, and then we'll get started. Well, I will repeat that. My name is Dan Vlamis, President of Analytics and Data Oracle User Community. We're going to start with today's TechCast given by Bud Endress with Oracle on easily build analytic applications using Apex and analytic views. We're going to start with some intro remarks that'll give about the Analytics and Data Oracle User Community, and then we'll get right into today's topic. So, Bud, if you would just advance to the next slide. This is in a series of TechCasts. AnDOUC has been doing this for, 4 or 5 years now. We have built up quite an impressive library of TechCasts that we call them. And those you can find at andouc.org/techcasts. I'll put that URL in the chat here in just a moment. So we have an archive of those out there. We encourage you to present your own topics. On there, you'll see that you can submit your own abstracts for that, and we would love to host you and have you present your content on what you are presenting, what you have done with the Oracle technology. This is just a quick plug for some upcoming TechCasts. We'll have one on our favorite features of OAC. That's coming up on August 22nd, and then what sessions to see at Oracle Cloud World on September 5th, and then beyond as well. So go ahead and submit your sessions there, and we'd love to see that. We're part of a growing user community, and you can go ahead and advance, Bud, to the next one. You can find us on andouc.org. We also have a Slack workspace where you can chat with people. We have very much a community there. Also, all of these TechCasts are available as well on our YouTube channel. If you go there, that's available off of this link or off of our homepage, AnDOUC, look for the YouTube link. And then we have social media platforms as well. We'll put those in the chat so you can follow along with us. And I do want to emphasize that this is a user community. This is not just Oracle. This is what we put together for helping other users in how they want to use Oracle technology. Go ahead, next slide. I'll also take a quick moment to plug our upcoming conference called Analytics and Data Summit 2025. That's taking place April 8th through 10th of 2025 at the Oracle Conference Center in Redwood Shores. And you'll find more information on that at the URL we'll put in the chat. We also have our call for speakers is now open. You can submit your abstract for that today and find out more about that upcoming conference. We'd love to have you join us and present. Go ahead, next slide. With that, let me go ahead and introduce Bud Endress, the Director of Product Management. Bud and I go way back. I think 3 decades, Bud? Is that right?
3 decades.
Something like that. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I should have asked your permission before I share that tidbit. I worked with Bud on something called Oracle OLAP and even predecessor products to that. And you'll see a lot of that is now in the Oracle Analytic Views, all that think and very nicely integrated into the Oracle database. With that, Bud, I will turn things over to you and have you start sharing.
Great. Dan, I think that we met in a cab in Atlanta in August of 1995 at a Express user group, if I recall correctly.
I think that's probably right. So long time ago. That's great. And I'll go on mute. If you have questions that you'd like to pose to Bud, if you'd put them in the Q&A widget, I will pose those or take a look. If we have time, we'll ask those questions. We should be able to, and put those in if you would while Bud's presenting. I'll try and figure out whether it's best to interrupt or wait till the end. So with that, I'll turn things over to you, Bud.
Great. Thanks, Dan. This is absolutely one of my favorite topics, by the way. I really like the combination of Oracle Analytic Views and Apex. And I just like giving this talk. It's a fun talk. So I'm going to have some fun. I hope that you do also. I'm going to do a handful of slides, and then I'm really just going to get into a lot of demos. And I think you're going to find it really interesting. I'm going to, as I do this, I'm going to be looking at analytic views. I'm going to be looking at analytic views at Apex. I'll show you a little bit of analytic view design in one of the design tools that we have. And I'm also going to pull Oracle Analytic Cloud into this a little bit, because Oracle Analytic Cloud has native support for analytic views, and let you get a little bit of a taste of the whole ecosystem. But the star of the show today is Apex use of analytic views. So I'm going to kind of start this with sort of a problem statement. Okay. And the question is, if you were to build an application such as I have on the screen, I'll explain this a little bit, what some of the requirements are. How would you do it if you're in Apex, right? Like, what would be your strategy for building this application? And I'm going to give you the preview. It really comes down to the SQL generation, right? So, this application has, interesting calculations. It has a lot of interactivity in terms of data selections. It's accessing data at different levels of aggregation, things like that. Like, it's a pretty busy, active Apex application. And there's a lot of calculation that's going on behind the scenes. And, if you're an Apex developer, you know that it's your responsibility to generate the SQL, right? And, that can be kind of challenging. So let's just kind of take a close look at, some of the requirements of this application. And by the way, the application is related to fuel prices in Italy, and we built it for somebody in Italy a little while ago. And I'm going to give you live access to this application in a minute. So if you want to kind of look along as I'm doing this, you're more than welcome to do it. Okay, so what this application needs to do is allow the user to query across multiple dimensions, different levels of aggregation, for example, month, quarter, and year in a time dimension. And it needs to do time series transformations, right? Prior periods, percent change year ago, things like that. And if you sort of think about this, right, the SQL is nasty, right? You need to be able to provide Apex with complex multi-pass SQL. So if we're just doing a calculation like a percent change year ago, you got to do a lot in that query, right? So the first thing you got to do is you got to find year ago, right? So you got to expand that filter, and you got to worry about, null values and things like that. Then, if it's a year ago, if it's at the month level, you got to find the year, then you got to walk it back, it just gets really complicated. Then you got to aggregate. Then you got to do your lag calculations. Then you got to do, jumping on here a little bit. Then you got to do the percent changes. And in this application, I'm also letting people do like smoothing, right? Moving averages. So just kind of imagine what that's kind of like, right? It's just really, really complicated. And the challenge, if you're an Apex developer, is this is your problem, right? You have to do it. Apex isn't doing it for you. So you've got to generate SQL like this if you're querying tables, right? And it's just really hard, right? Okay, so of course I have an answer to that, and that answer is Oracle Analytic Views. And for this discussion, Analytic Views does a lot of things, but if you're a Apex developer, the main thing is that you define the analytic view in the database. It's an object in the database. It's a view, you query it, and it does all the hard work for you. So you essentially define a semantic model over your tables, you get a view, and you query that view with really pretty simple, reusable template-like select statements. And the analytic view or the database has a SQL generator, and it turns your relatively simple SQL statements into the SQL that's used for execution. It's really optimally generated, and you don't have to build the query that we just saw on the previous screen. It provides you all the Oracle metadata in the Oracle data dictionary, so you don't have to manage metadata. It's just a really solid foundation for Apex and analytic applications. It's included in every edition of the Oracle database, from standard edition on-prem to autonomous on the cloud, no extra cost. So, the cost of trying it is really just a little bit of your time. So, give it a try. It's really perfect for building analytic applications in Apex. It's also, as I previously mentioned, supported by Analytic Cloud. So you can build one foundation, one analytic view in the database, and you can query it with both of these simultaneously, right? That's kind of the basic idea. Now, I have a whole bunch of other
I want to interrupt. One question
Yeah.
came in that I figured this would be appropriate time. Is it supported
Yeah,
on
sure.
Oracle Analytics Server as well? You mentioned Oracle Analytics Cloud.
Yes, it is. When I'm just going to say Oracle Analytic Cloud, but it's both.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Equivalent support. Absolutely. So I think to get a lot of demo in, I'm just going to stop with the slides right now, right? Like, who wants to sit around and listen to a bunch of slides? So I'm just really going to jump in and really let's just get our fingers dirty here, okay? And let's go to the application first, right? So here I am. Let's just walk through this application a little bit, right? So again, we built this, for an entity in Italy, and the topic is fuel prices. And just gonna kind of walk through what the application does a little bit. And I really want you to, again, think about like, wow, if I had to build this, how would I do it, right? What I was trying to do here is sort of build that site's no longer there. Okay. Well, it didn't go directly to it. I was trying to build a better, more interactive version of a website. And what this application does is query some tables in an analytic view, again, fuel prices. And here we have a page which is just kind of like recent prices, right? We have some graphs and things like that, different fuels. And down here, we sort of have a bit of a composite view of this, right? And this is similar to the original website, but it has a lot more interactivity. So I can do things like choose, the component of a price, right? The final price is made up of, some taxes and, the actual refined price of the product. And I can do some transformations, right? So let's just say percent change from prior period, things like that. And if I go down here, I actually like this visualization a lot, right? I'm going to do an index of the current price to the first period in the series. And these are over a whole bunch of different fuels, right? So, there's a lot going on behind this. And if I go to this page here, right, I have a lot of interactivity. And, so here I'll just select it, a different level of aggregation. And here I'll just add a different, an additional, product. And here we'll do percent change prior period. And then here maybe we'll do like a 10 period moving average, right? This is the kind of thing that you would usually do in like a BI tool. And I've done it pretty easily here in Apex. Now, you might have noticed this little show SQL switch here. I'm going to come back to that, right? But what I want to do is really kind of, I guess, nerd out here. I'm going to go to SQL Developer. I'm going to run a few queries. and give you an idea of some of the things that are going on in the background here. So this Italy weekly fuel prices V for view, it's a view, and this is where the data is coming from for this application. So you can see it has, date, month, year, product names, things like that. Now, let's think a little bit about some of these calculations that we have to do. So let's say I want to do, percent change year ago at aggregate level or something like that. What's the SQL that I need to generate? Well, I'm actually incredibly lazy. So I actually asked ChatGPT. I said, well, what kind of SQL do I need to generate here? And if I wanted, year, product name, and price component, euros per thousand, which is the base measurement, and the percent change in euros for the same period a year ago, ChatGPT says that a query like this is probably what I need. And this looks reasonable. The thing is as an Apex developer, again, it's your job to generate this, right? And it's one thing if it's sort of a fixed query, right? You write it, you run it. It's different if your application is interactive like mine is, right? And let's just kind of notice this here, right? Just to kind of hammer this home a little bit. I'm selecting year, and I have different, columns in here, and each column represents a level of aggregation. And, that's implemented, down here in group by, right? We all know that. We write SQL. Okay, let's just say, well, I want quarter instead of year. I have a different query, right? I'm querying different columns. So again, if you're the Apex developer, it's your job to generate this, and you probably have to have some metadata behind it to even know what the columns are. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be pretty tough. And I'm going to show you how to do it really easily. All right. So here's our table, right? That's our starting point, and those are some queries you might need to generate. And so I have some objects in the database. These are called analytic views. And the interesting thing about sort of presenting it this way is I'm running queries against the data dictionary, and you really get to see that these are objects in the database, right? There's no better way to do it than just running some queries. And this is the analytic view that we're kind of working with here today. And I'll give you an idea how this was created. Now I'm going to run another dictionary query, and there's a lot of dictionary queries for this. There's a lot of metadata, but this one is good to just kind of get an idea of, what's basically going on here, right? We have a couple different hierarchies. And if we look at the time hierarchy, for example, this aggregates from date to month, quarter, and year, right? So you're sort of seeing some structure added to these tables. We have hierarchies and we have levels. There's other things, but this is some of the most important stuff. And then we also have measures. So this particular view is looking at base measures. You mean these come directly from the fact table, right? So we have a measure name coming from column name. Pretty simple. And then we have some other measures that are calculations, right? So we have some measures, and these measures have expressions. We're going to look at this in a little bit more detail. But you've just sort of seen a couple simple queries, and these simple queries give you the general outline of what this analytic view looks like, from a structural point of view. Now, the next thing you might be thinking about here is, well, what's in an analytic view and how do I query it? All right, let's take a look. So I'm going to do something here that I don't do very often, a select star from the analytic view, right? You can see it has a whole bunch of columns. And I just kind of want to expose this to you a little bit. So what the analytic view does is it provides all of this structure, all of this metadata, and it provides you with a whole bunch of interesting columns to work with. And it returns for rows, both the detail, what comes in the fact table, and the aggregate rows, right? So essentially, it presents itself as a fully denormalized, fully solved, I'm going to use the word cube. I don't usually use the word cube with an analytic view, but Dan brought up OLAP, so what the heck, I'll do that. So if I look at this, I'm seeing original columns from, for example, the timetable. It makes up its own unique key, which is good because, I can have a city named New York and a state named New York, right? So we need to uniquify that in some way or another. And then it has columns like this member caption and member description. We're going to use these a lot in Apex. I'll use these member column things. We know what level of aggregation it's at. We have a nested hierarchical ordering column, and we know where it is in the hierarchy. Whole bunch of stuff like that. I'm not going to go into that in excruciating detail here because you don't really need to know it right now, especially if you're an Apex developer. So let's look at a typical query that you might generate in Apex. All right, so the way this works is you're selecting a hierarchy and a column from that hierarchy. I'm selecting from this member caption column. And the reason I'm doing that is this column always has a user-friendly name across all levels of aggregation. And there's one for each hierarchy. So when you write a SQL generator in Apex, you can literally hard code to member caption. I do it, right? They always say never hard code anything. You can do it. Member caption exists. It has the same role in every analytic view. So I'm doing that for each of the hierarchies, and then I'm selecting a couple measures. And I'm going to focus on this percent change, price percent change year ago here. The definition of this measure is burned into the analytic view. I designed that when I was designing the analytic view. When I'm querying it, it's not my responsibility to tell the application or write it in the SQL. I can, and you're going to see an example of that coming up, and it's kind of cool in the Apex app. But you don't have to. If you want to burn it in the analytic view and just select it, you can do it. Now, I'm selecting from that analytic view, and I'm telling it what hierarchies I want to use. So this analytic view, the definition might have like 50 hierarchies, I don't know, whatever it is. You can dimension it by as much as you want. I'm just saying I'm going to use these hierarchies right now. And these are the only things that really matter from a runtime perspective, the hierarchies that are listed here. And I'm going to ask for certain levels of aggregation, and I just do it by saying where level name is year or level name is product name. And then down here, I'm going to order by this higher order column, which is generated by the analytic view. I'll give you an idea of kind of how that works in a second. All of these columns, member name, level name, higher order, and so on, exist for every analytic view. Once you learn this basic template, you got it. And what do you not see in this query? You do not see joins. You do not see group by. You don't see an aggregation function for euros per thousand. I'll tell you it's average. You don't see how price percent change year ago is calculated, because when you query the analytic view, you don't need to know that, right? So now I just have this basic template, and there we go. I have the query. I have my percent changes and so on. If I want a different level of aggregation, I just change that word. Instead of year, I change it to quarter, right? And now I get quarters. If I want both, maybe I just change it to in, year, quarter. Right? So imagine you're building your Apex application. What do your filters start to look like? They kind of start to look like these things. And I ordered it by this higher order thing. And for free now, I get quarters within years, right? Or months within quarters, things like that. When you're working with an analytic view, that's, as an Apex developer, kind of your job to generate this as the query, not the other nasty queries that we saw before. Okay, let's
But
get off
now that
this.
you have that basic intro, for those that are wondering, do I have to pay extra for analytic views or something? The question is are analytic views available in ADW by default, or do we need additional roles options to be switched on?
Okay, so as I mentioned previously, analytic views are included at no extra cost in every single edition of the Oracle database. Standard edition, on up, cloud, and on-prem. They are always there. You don't have to enable them. You don't have to do anything special.
Okay.
Period.
Thank you.
Just like views. They're just there. All right. So let's kind of get off this and let's kind of return to our application a little bit here. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of start going behind the scenes here a little bit, right? Let's go back to this one. So I don't know if I lingered on this. I'm gonna make sure that I go back to this. And whoops. If you want to, I'm gonna hold here for a second. If you want to get to this application right now, just scan the QR code and you'll get there. You're going to be running the same exact instance of the application that I am, right? So you're welcome to, play with this yourself.
But I'll put that URL that you gave me, I'll put that in the chat, okay?
Okay, good. And Dan, I think I also gave you a URL to sort of my collateral library. Yeah, you can put that in there too, and you can get to this application through that.
Okay, super.
All right. So I'm going to hit the Show SQL button. And the idea here is that you can see the SQL that I am generating for every single visualization in this application. And I'm going to start with a transformation of what I'll call just the actual value, right? So this is just querying the base measure of the analytic view. This is coming directly from the fact table. I'm using a little bit different form of the query. So I'm using it where I'm saying from analytic view using, right? So this is a little bit different. Excuse me. The magic here with this is that when you use this form, you can use this clause. It says add measures. So I can define calculations on the fly in the query, which is incredibly useful. If I get down, okay, so let's just walk through this, right? So what I'm saying is select hierarchy, member name. Remember I talked about that. I'm doing that for each hierarchy. I'm also selecting product and price component color. I built that into the table and the analytic view, and I'm just passing that along to Apex, right, to color the lines. And I did this to match the original website where this came from. Okay, so I'm selecting these columns from the analytic view. I'm selecting a measure, and I'm using this add measures form here. And my measure is just euros per thousand. Okay, so, just a little bit of a twist here. There's some other things you can do when you use this. I'm asking it for at level name month between some time periods. And if you know Apex, you've probably used this Apex string split. All this is really doing is converting a list of values from a selection into into sort of like an in list. All right, so it's kind of standard Apex stuff. And then I'm ordering it by higher order. So you see sort of the same, template that I showed you in SQL Developer. All right. So select member caption, measure from analytic view, hierarchies, where either level name or member name type things down here and order by higher order. All right, you see the same exact thing here on the right? The products are different. We see the same exact thing down here and down here, just additional products. And as I go down to this different visualization, I see the same thing, right? It's the same query template, right? I'm just using this over and over and over in this application, right? So kind of once I get this down, however I provide it or generate it, yeah, I have it. I just reuse it. And if I really go behind the scenes in Apex here, we'll go to the chart itself. So what I did is wrote a little function, and that function just takes some arguments and returns that query. Why was I able to write that function pretty easily? Because it's just a template, and I'm just doing some value substitutions here, right? That's all I'm doing. So let's see, query A. I think there's two different templates that I used in this application, right? That are pretty similar. So I just call this for basically all my visualizations, right? Okay, now let's switch here a little bit. And the fuel types has some additional interactivity. But let's look at the SQL for the visualization, right? Guess what? It just takes the same form, right? It's the same template. The only things that are really changing here are the values and the filters and the measure definition. Now, this is kind of cool. I'm going to focus on this measure a little bit here. So what I've done is I've asked for the percent change from prior period. So the analytic view has its own expressions. And a lot of these expressions mimic, or there they are, I guess, window functions, but they utilize elements of the model rather than referencing column names. And they're easier to use. And one of the values of that is that, it doesn't matter what level of aggregation you're querying, the time hierarchy is the time hierarchy. So this expression just doesn't need to change. So if I'm going to simplify this a little bit, no smoothing. So to do a percent change prior period, maybe you'll even make it a little, how about percent change year ago? Because that would be harder. So I have a lag diff percent function over the measure, over the time hierarchy, 1 year ago. So hierarchy across ancestor at level year. So the offset is at year, even when I'm at the quarter level, right? So it's really a very simple expression to get a year ago type calculation. And if I want to, let's make this at the month level, whoops. Right, so to get the month level, I just changed that word, right? If you're an Apex, boy, is that easy, right? I've just substituted this item value into this, and that's all I had to do. I have my measure, and then if I want like a 10-period moving average, I'm just going to nest this, right? So it's an average over the hierarchy within level, right? So this is kind of the gist of it if you're an Apex developer, right? It's like you just have these reusable templates that you just make substitutions in, and they're really, really powerful. Again, no joins, no aggregation operators. If you want, if this measure is selected in the analytic or saved in the analytic view as part of the definition, you can just select it. If you want to generate it on the fly, you can do that. That's pretty easy. right? It's very cool. It's very powerful within an Apex. All right, so let's just dive into something else really quick. And oops, let me stay here for a second. So, what about lists like this, right? Um, or, lists like this, right? So I have levels, I'm choosing different levels, I need different values, things like that. Like, where do they come from? And, how do I put those together? So let's go over to here for a second and get that out of the way. So you can query a hierarchy. And here I'm querying a hierarchy. I have this member name. We talked about that earlier. It's sort of the user-friendly name. And then it makes a key value for me, right? So we've all done this if we use Apex a million times, right? Select something as display, something else as return. And it's just selecting from the hierarchy. And I'm just saying, give me years, right? So here we go. Well, what if I want quarters? Right. I just changed this one word and spell it right, please. Thank you. Good. I just changed this. So I just make a substitution into this. I don't have to change the column names. I don't have to, anything like that. And, quite frankly, if I want all of them, I can just ask for all of them, right? And it just gives me all of them. I don't have like a union all across a whole bunch of different columns. And it's the same for every single hierarchy. So it's really one of these things where you learn it once and you got it, right? So this is the product hierarchy. All right. So if we go back to this now, and we just kind of do a quick edit on this, that's the query that you're gonna see, right? There it is. And if I want to see something else, right, price component, guess what the query is going to look like? There it is, same exact thing. The only thing that's different is this. So, again, for an Apex developer, that's kind of the gist of it. And once you get the hang of it, you can really, really do a lot. Why don't we have any data here? I don't know. Oops. Well, I don't know, screwed something up here. Okay, no worries. All right. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Hopefully you get the general idea. And if you do, then you can dig in and do some learning on your own. Now, one question you're going to have is, how do I design these things, right? There's different tools available. I'm just going to switch over to a tool that's available in Autonomous Database. Maybe it's going to be your tool of choice, maybe it isn't, who knows, but it will, it does the job, and it's easy to show, so I'm going to do that. So this is the data analysis tool in this database actions tool set in Autonomous Database. This is the analytic view, and I'm just going to ask to edit it. And this just sort of give you an idea of the types of things that you would do when you design an analytic view, right? So, obviously it's going to have a name, and a really interesting thing, and we're going to see this put to use in a second in Oracle Analytic Cloud. The very interesting thing here is that the analytic view has a ton of metadata. It's mapped to physical tables. It has the structural metadata, like, the hierarchies and the measures and all that other good kind of stuff, levels. But everything in the analytic view can have a nice descriptive, what we call caption, and a description. So the caption is typically what is displayed to the end user in tools. The description can be anything you want, right? Paragraphs worth of stuff, right? So you can attach all of this presentation layer metadata, to borrow from OAC or the BI server, to the analytic view. All of that comes in just as a standard part of it. And it can actually be in any language of the database. So the model and the data itself can be presented in multiple languages. Okay, so this analytic view is mapped to a fact table. You can map analytic views to denormalized tables, stars, snowflakes, or any combination thereof. It has hierarchies. Let's look at time because everybody's familiar with that, right? So we have a hierarchy, caption and description, it's always there. And this hierarchy has levels. And levels have caption and descriptions. It comes from a table and it's mapped to different columns. This is a very simple design. So the key and the member name and the description and the ordering and blah, 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 it all maps to the same column, but you get a lot of flexibility here, right? So you might have a label for your value and it might sort by something else for whatever reason. Sort of different levels. Here's a quick look at a measure coming from a fact table, right? Name, caption, description. It comes from a column and it has an aggregation operator. And then if we go down here, let's see here. How about this year ago calculation? Remember we looked at this, I generated this as part of the query. It could also be just in the definition of the analytic view permanently, in which case I just select the column representing it. And here we have that, lag diff percent over hierarchy time 1 year ago. And this thing positioned from beginning, maybe you want a year ago is measured from the beginning of the period, or the end of the period. But you have all these expressions to work with and you can do lots of different things. And again, if you're in Apex afterwards, you could just select these as columns. It's not your job to worry about how they're calculated, right? So if I wanted to make some changes here, I press this little update button and it's deployed to the database. There it is. It's sitting in the Oracle Data Dictionary, and you can query it, right? So we have this foundation in the database. It's kind of almost like a little mini BI server, but I do mean mini. It doesn't try to do everything the BI server does. It does really take a dimensional perspective at it, but it serves a similar role of mapping to a physical layer, having a business model and calculation layer, and a presentation layer, right? So let's use it somewhere else, right?
Bud, we do have several questions queuing up. I'm kind of waiting for you to get through the meat of this in case it answers some of the questions, but just from a time management perspective. Okay.
Very good. Let's do about 6 more minutes.
Okay.
That'll leave, 10, 12 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I'm in Oracle Analytic Cloud, and there we go. I have Italy weekly fuel prices. This is a workbook that I previously built. And this is querying the same exact analytic view. So the picture that kind of emerges here is by building the business model, the analytic view in the database, I can support multiple applications. Right? So maybe some of the usage of this data or this analytic view might be, best through an Apex application that does things that are very sort of specific. Maybe you want to use it in an ad hoc context, right? Or just a packaged application type context. Well, OAC has read the metadata from the Oracle Data Dictionary and it's generating queries just like we saw before, right, with that hierarchy clause in it. So it understands the analytic view and queries it natively. And here I see the model over here, right? And OAC really does a great job of this. And here's something that I think is kind of interesting, is that OAC presents it in sort of a duality. It presents it a hierarchy as both columns and a hierarchy, right? You can kind of use it in either context. And, then you can just do sort of the normal things that you do in OAC. You have all of that interactivity. And again, OAC is really smart about how it's querying the analytic view. Now, I'm going to back up just a little bit here, and just to kind of make the point, I'm going to create a new data set. And this is my connection. And this connection knows that it's connecting to analytic views. So if you do this in OAC, look for a connection type for analytic views. And these are analytic views that are in the database. And I think this is one that we were looking at. Yeah. So I'm just going to call this fuel temp, right? So as an OAC user, this is all I need to do, right? It's just imported this in. I don't have any other setup to do. So there it is. There's my analytic view that we just saw in Apex, that we just saw in that design tool and autonomous database. And, we're just ready to rock and roll, right? Just start putting stuff together. So there's our measure. Let me see here, where's time? Let's use time as a hierarchy. Grab that time hierarchy in here. Drill that down. The product across. Right? So I selected a hierarchy down, columns across, kind of do it the way you want. And, percent. 2% change, right? So I didn't have to create the percent change as a calculated measure in OAC because it's in the analytic view. So that's kind of the story, folks. Again, it's in every edition of the database, and give it a whirl. Dan put a link into chat, which has access to my sort of complete collateral library. There's tons of live SQL videos. Oracle live SQL tutorials. There's demos, there's presentations, access to, what, it's all there. All right, Dan, let's head into Q&A.
Okay, then I've got, starting at the top, this came from a little while ago, so some of these you may have already handled, but any sample lab demo documentation about using time dimensions on bitemporal tables?
There is a live SQL tutorial on time series calculations. I'm not sure what bitemporal tables means, so I'm not sure how to answer that.
I was trying to parse that myself. My guess is that's multiple time hierarchies, and that I assume is supported.
Oh yeah, absolutely, sure.
Yeah. Okay. What are the performance tuning implications of AVs? How do they show up in an explain plan or SQL traces?
Okay, that's a big topic. So I'm going to try to do a short version of that. Okay. Analytic views are layered or use tables. Analytic views generate and execute SQL. So the way I'm going to answer this question two different ways. One is because it's all SQL against your tables, analytic views will perform as well as the very best handwritten SQL against the tables that you have. Okay, so it's all SQL and they're your tables. A lot of it depends on what you're mapping the analytic view to. If you're mapping the analytic view to a, say, a star schema with columnar storage, or boy, better yet, in-memory columnar storage, that's the foundation for analytic queries in the Oracle database. If you want fast aggregate queries in the database, that's the structure you use, regardless of whether you're using analytic views or not, right? That's just the database. And the same rules applies to analytic views. If on the far end of the extreme, you have data sitting out in object storage, or you're mapping to a transaction schema of row store tables, and you've got a whole bunch of joins that are doing what. You're going to get the performance that you expect with that type of a schema. That's one answer. Now, there's a but. The analytic view has a really nifty feature called a materialized cache. So the analytic view can take your data and make a better representation of this. It can make a materialization of all or some of your data, usually some aggregate data, in a form that is better suited for analysis, right? It borrows some concepts from materialized views in that it's materializing it into tabular storage in the database. It's also very different from analytic views. There is a automatic mode for this that is pretty interesting. So if you want to use this, you can use what we call A/B tune, DBMS A/B tune, and it monitors the workload and manages this for you under the covers automatically. And this can be a great tool for aggregate data or compensating against less than optimal original storage. Okay, big topic.
A couple things related to that, Bud. One is, did you mean you can build AV on object storage files?
You can build an AV on top of pretty much anything that returns rows and columns and has sort of characterization number data types, right?
Yeah. May not perform real well.
Well, it may not perform real well at runtime. No, I mean, it might. But like I said, you have the materialized cache. So if you want to materialize some of that locally and use the AV infrastructure to do it, that's a great way to do it.
And then there's another one related. Do we have any parameters to optimize performance? Can we influence performance in any way? Can we influence cache? You kind of just went over the cache piece of this, but
yeah, really your two inputs into this are, one, what is the foundation that you're giving the analytic view, right? What do those tables look like? Two, are you using caching, right? Okay. You don't do things like hinting and stuff like that with analytic views. Analytic views, your queries are relatively simple, and the analytic view generates the SQL for you. And that SQL is very heavily optimized into blah, 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 blah.
Okay. Other questions? This is from back a while ago. Instead of sum of sales in the specified level of time, can we get the last value for that period of time?
You can. There are functions to get last values, yes. And you would do that in the form of a calculated measure.
Okay. Is the logic designed inside the AV or Apex?
I'm not really sure what the logic is in this case.
Yeah, the question was asked a while ago.
Yeah, but I'll interpret it this way. The model has all of the structure and all of the calculation rules, and the analytic view returns the data at detail and aggregate level data without joins and group by. So I sort of interpret it that way, and if that's the correct interpretation, the answer is it's embedded, the logic is embedded in the analytic view.
Okay. Another one is going back to alphabet soup. I love this. Going back to alphabet soup days of describing cubes. Can we say AV is rollup? Specifically, are the aggregations done at runtime and thus no additional storage overhead?
Well, I would describe it as a hybrid, okay? The analytic view itself does not store any data. So let's call that rollup, relational OLAP. Love it, blast from the past. It is definitely not a MOLAP structure like the OLAP option to the Oracle database. You can, I talked a little bit about the materialized cache. you can materialize aggregate data that is used, managed by, and used by the analytic view. So call that what you want.
Yeah. All right. And this was back when you were showing the tool for manipulating analytic views. Can you create the AV in this tool or just edit an existing AV? Can I use that data studio piece, whatever you called it, for creating them from scratch?
Yes, absolutely. So that tool can be used to create analytic views, to edit analytic views. Some people use and like that type of tool, the GUI experience, you know, and a lot of people, you know, when they really get into it, also, depending on the application, generate the analytic view DDL. It's not very hard to do, but you know, there's lots of different ways. At the end of the day, it's SQL DDL. But you know, if you want to get started, you want to give it a try, you have autonomous, yeah, I would recommend it. You know, just give that tool a try, and it will. It's an easy place to start.
Here's this comment, love to see a session with Apex and vector searches. That would be interesting with the vector search capability now in 23 AI.
So would I.
Yeah, more build.
Yeah.
And then the last one that I have is this OAC workbook is not part of Bud's Oracle AV page. Curious if this workbook is shareable or if we can access the Italy prices AV via our OAC instance.
Is my instance of OAC is not public.
Yeah, sure.
The application and the data would be easily shareable. So if somebody wants that and wants to get in touch with me, we can do that. And if I do that once, I'll package it up and put it on my collateral page.
Yeah, good. Well, that's what I have in terms of questions that have come in here. So appreciate, Bud. We're about at the end of the hour anyway. Really appreciate you taking us through this and showing what you can do with analytic views. It obviously is you know, kind of near and dear to my heart from doing this stuff with much more difficult tools, let's just call it, in the past. And as well, fits very well with the analytics and data Oracle user community as a topic. And hopefully we can find a way to include you in the Analytics and Data Summit coming up. I put a link to that, and maybe we can have you present this type of topic for more things, either in person or another TechCast. So
yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Dan. It was really great fun. I love this topic.
thank you so much, Bud, and we'll stay in touch. And people want to learn more about this stuff, you've got this link to Bud's library, and then also see us on the Analytics and Data Oracle user community. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
All right, bye-bye. Well, are we good, Dan?